today, and there will be a similar session in another time zone on the same topic, and then management advice tomorrow, and then trying to put everything together on Thursday. So while we recognize that everything is connected to everything, and we may not be able to make a clean cut between these different parts of the fisheries activity, this is the way we try to structure it. So the hope is that today we will be able to provide on the stock assessment side input to these overarching questions that I mentioned, and talking about both the data rich areas and data limited methods and areas, and then evaluation of where we can go. So this is an exclusive but highly competent audience we have got together here, and extremely happy to have Manuela Acevedo with us to give the introductory presentation and also take part in the discussion. I think, Manuela, I will simply leave it to you, and if you want to say something about yourself and where you're coming from in the start, please do so. We all belong in different institutions and programs, and maybe have different roles, formal roles with our governments and so on, but I want to emphasize that in this process of ocean best practices, we are all individuals, and we are all experts more or less to different degree and different areas, and we're trying to progress the community and the field as a whole. We are not involved in anything like intergovernmental negotiations, but what is everybody going to do and what are the standards we ask you to follow. We are trying to develop the field and share experiences and go forward. So with that, Manuela, can I give the floor to you and ask you to introduce?
Yes. Okay, thank you, Peter. Hello, good morning. So I'm very happy to have the chance to make this presentation. I am a senior researcher from the Portuguese Institute for the Sea and Atmosphere, with headquarters in Lisbon. Is the sound okay? Yeah? Yeah. So I am the coordinator, currently the coordinator of the Biological National Sampling Program. And I also work with the fish stock assessment and advice for fisheries management. Okay, so I will share now my presentation. So it's okay, can you see it there? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so for this session is, for the stock assessment session, well, we'll go around concepts and giving examples on stock assessment for data rich, data limited stocks, and also going on talking about management strategy evaluation. Here, so scientific information is critical to the management system. Stock assessments estimate the impact of fish catches on fish stocks to measure and guide the sustainable balance between, on one side, conservation, so to avoid overfishing and to provide adequate protection to the ecosystem, and utilization on the other side, which usually involves economic and social goals and choices. Could be about concerns about jobs or recreational opportunities, or increasing food production to respond to demands. So the uncertainty and risks resulting from limitations in the scientific information and in the management system calls for a precautionary approach, which leads to reducing catch targets as uncertainty and risk increases. So in fact, the extent of balanced harvest is not purely a scientific question, but also a legal and social and economic choice. This plot illustrates the, say, the global concept for sustainable use of living marine resources. So let's look at the blue production curve with showing the annual catch against exploitation ratio, say the fraction caught annually. So on the right side of this blue curve, we would see that low fishing produces not much catch, but allows the stock to retain a large fraction of big old fish. On the left side, we would see that persistent overfishing also produces a little catch, but from a small stock, with the population sizes truncated, because there are great reductions in the larger or big old fish. So an intermediate level of fishing effort can produce maximum sustainable yield, which is the largest average catch that can be continuously taken from a sustainable stock under the prevailing ecological and environmental conditions. The concept of pretty good yield from Alec McCall and investigated by Ray Ilborn also 10 years ago suggests that a range of fishing mortalities can also produce catches that are similar to the theoretical maximum sustainable yield. But the important is that aiming to the right side of pretty good yield produces several benefits. For instance, there is a lower effort needed, the catch rates are higher, the stock shows less fluctuations, the high composition of large fish in the stock, and also there is a lower impact in the ecosystem. So data collection is key for the assessment process. Accurate or more accurate assessments rely on catch data, stock abundance from research surveys, biological data of good quality. Stock assessments are currently increasingly using environmental and ecosystem indicators too. So the assessment models produce estimates of stock productivity, biomass, and fishing mortality. And these quantities are used to also estimate reference points and allow to determine the stock status by comparing the current estimates of the stock to these reference points. The assessment models also project the catches, and there could be several fishing mortality scenarios. And these all quantities are used by managers and that apply and should follow some laws, regulations, and monitoring and enforcement. One, for instance, could be in a management system that rely or uses TAC, a TAC system, management system. TAC means the total allowable catch, could be one of the chances. So assessment models, so the match model complexity to the available data. So the range of models used depends upon the available data and knowledge. So we could say that a good full assessment is generally considered to be an age-structured assessment, which is supported by a time series of age composition and survey data. There are known factors that affect stocks, and so stock assessment scientists strive to have a more complete connection with these known factors, and they try and generally configure the models so that they are responsive to these forcing causes. In many cases, however, data is more limited, and it's not possible to do the stock assessment with an age-based or full analytical assessment. but we have biomass dynamic models, which allows to use time series of catch data and at least a survey or a CPUE abundance time series. In other cases, the information available is more limited, and then we will talk later, we have to use data limited methods. Here is an example this is an example of the US specific hake assessment, which is a data-rich assessment. So a time series of catch data, as you see in the plot in the upper, yes, a time series of catch data from a time series of abundance from an acoustic survey, estimates of the proportion by age in the fishery and in the acoustic survey is used, are available, and the assessment is performed using stock synthesis. So that can allow us to estimate the relative abundance and fishing rate with confidence intervals. So the estimated quantities are compared in relation to reference points. So we have reference points in terms of biomass and fishing mortality, which allow us to determine the stock status and also define what would be projecting the trends of the stock in the short and long term, also give this relevant information to managers so that they apply their own rules. So stock assessments are increasingly performed for, say, hundreds of stocks, for instance, in the worldwide. So we could say that these are stock assessments are performed and used for management in regional fisheries management organizations, international commissions, and countries. For instance, the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea performed the stock assessment and give advice for fisheries management annually for more than 260 stocks. Over 150 stocks are assessed annually in the US alone. So most assessments are in fact conducted using software packages. Now here is just a short view of the many packages available for stock assessment worldwide. And the point is that though they are developed locally, they in fact are applied globally. For instance, stock synthesis was developed in USA, state space assessment model, SAM in Denmark, assessment for all A4A in the JRC, gadget in Iceland, and all of these methods are used by assessment expert groups of ICES. One interesting point is that recently a paper published by Ray Ilborn and colleagues has shown, looking at the stocks worldwide that are being assessed, has shown that these stocks, the status of these stocks is generally good. So while it saying that the more information we have, and if there is a good quality, good data quality, and we can apply good stock assessment, then it will be very helpful, but it also will require that there is a stringent management measures. Well, so in fact, the data and the quality, the type of data available determines the assessment and the methods that can be applied. So many stocks worldwide, the data available and the quality of data the data available is scarce and the quality is not very good. So it's not possible to perform full analytical assessments and have reliable estimates of stock status. So for some stocks, only catch data is available, or likely also some supplementary information. And so, in fact, we would say that that case is the really data poor stock, and would require the application of data poor methods. In other cases, we have more information, so likely catch data, but also lens composition of the catch or landings, and some life history parameters. And that could be the lens or age at maturity, or somatic information or estimates of growth parameters. And in that case, we can apply other type of data limited methods, though mostly in the cases we would have a kind of qualitative analysis, as illustrated in the middle plot with the kind of a traffic light. In other situations, we have some more information, and then we would be able to come up with a semi-quantitative assessment, as is illustrated in the plot on the right for the NIFROP stock. And I think that the aim and the goal for sustainable fishery, healthy stocks, and low impact in the ecosystem, well, has put a lot of pressure in the sense of developing the methods, the stock assessment methods, but also collecting the data that is relevant to improve our current knowledge of stock status. And in terms of the data limited, one of the areas that has seen a remarkable progress in recent years is the simulation testing using management strategy evaluation, simulation testing of catch rules. And we have recently one paper that has been published in the ICES Journal of Marine Science from Fisher and colleagues, which addresses and shows these developments. So management strategy evaluation is a framework which is extensively used either to evaluate the performance of a management strategy, or to identify a best management strategy among a set of candidate strategies. So this here trying to show or illustrate the several components of management strategy evaluation. On the left, the operating model, where we simulate the fleet behavior and the biologic dynamics of the stocks, which in fact are the mathematical representation of the vestigial scientific knowledge of the natural and fishery system. So it's kind of a virtual true dynamics of the system. On the right, the management procedure, which includes the stock assessment, and which is our perceived true, perceived stock, the harvest control rule, which is used to determine the management actions, and the management process to implement the scientific advice for fisheries management. So two other components, two other important components of MSC are the observation era, which represents the process of generating the fishery and stock data, which is then used in the stock assessment. And in the upper, the implementation era, which incorporates the way the actors implement regulations and perceive the management objectives. We'd like to show you an example of the development of a long-term management strategy using management strategy evaluation. So this is the case of horse mackerel. Horse mackerel is a commercially important species in the Northeast Atlantic, and it was a development of a management strategy evaluation for the southern stock, which is exploited in the Iberian Peninsula waters by Portugal and Spain in mixed fisheries. So the development of the long-term management strategy was an initiative of the Pelagic Advisory Council in collaboration with the Southwestern Waters Advisory Council. So it was an iterative process between scientists and stakeholders and involved the definition of management objectives, harvest control rules, several TAC setting options, including annual catch stability levels, the acceptance of biological reference points, and agreement of FMSY target year. So stakeholders also suggested performance metrics to be computed, and they had particularly interest in the catch annual, interannual variation. So within the process, the proposed management strategy was sent by the Pelagic Advisory Council to the EU, to DG Mare, and asked them for the scientific evaluation of the proposal. So DG Mare requested ICES to assess whether the plan was precautionary, so that is regarding the risk to the reproductive capacity of the stock, and also if the plan would ensure that the stock would be fished and maintained in the future at levels that could produce maximum sustainable yield. So the adopted harvest control rule that you see here in the plot in the lower left included several reference points. So a limit biomass, so a stock size below which risk of reduced recruitment is high, and an MSY B-trigger. So this was defined as the lower bound of the spawning stock biomass fluctuations around BMSY. So it acted as a safeguard against an undesirable unexpected SSB or low SSB when fishing at FMSY. It also included fishing mortality reference point, FMSY, as a limit, and a very low F, designated F by catch, that was particularly of interest by stakeholders given the mixed fishery characteristics of the fishery. So the plan was evaluated to be attain the objectives, so and being to be precautionary, and then that information was given back to the DG Mare through the ICES advice following the request. Well, this is another example, but decided with Richard that I would present the example of the southern horse mackerel, and he would be presenting another example from US applied to the stock in the US. So in terms of synthesis or summary, so we could say that full assessment data includes abundance, biology, and catch, and it's relevant to quality of the data feeding the model. Assessment models estimates time series of abundance and fishing mortality by assimilating this data. So they provide the basis for status determination by comparison to reference points, and they project sustainable catch levels. So important also, methods are tailored to data availability and include data limited methods that can provide partial advice. Management strategy evaluation embed assessment concepts in closed loop simulations and is relevant to test the potential performance of alternative approaches or to evaluate a proposal. Well, and I think this is it as for the introduction. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Manuela. Thank you very much. This was, you certainly touched upon all the points that we hoped you would touch upon, including data rich and data limited areas or cases, and certainly illustrated how central stock assessment is depending on the data collected or not collected and feeding into the management, and then again evaluating management strategy. So this was really a very good overview to my mind, and very helpful for me at least to try and organize my thoughts about best practices in this area. So we are a limited crowd, so I would think we will not have to organize the order of speaking here very much. I think you can all just unmute yourself and take the floor. I think we can try to organize the discussion according to different subheadings, but I think I would start by opening the floor to everybody for immediate comments, what comes to mind. I must admit I have as you referred to the Ray Hilborn paper looking on the overview of assessed stocks, and I think the message is it's not only there, we've known it, some of it for a while, but it's clear there how well things are actually going if we do the job right. I mean, sometimes you always hear that much of the world's fish is overfished and everything is going bad. But I think it's a good tribute to science that things can go well if we just do the right things with fishery science, and that's a message that we sometimes need to get through to stakeholders. Yeah. Anyway, I think I just open the floor for questions and comments.
You can go for it, Christian.
Yes,
okay. So I don't come from a fisheries background. I'm just listening in out of interest, particularly because I'm involved in the goose biology and ecosystems panel with the essential ocean variables, working for the fish component. And within that, we need to figure out ways to, or put standardized networks together that are reporting on essential ocean variables for fish in relation to abundance and distributions. And I was just curious to know how the fisheries data that's collected around the world could contribute to this. And then particularly how potentially we could, or how you would combine assessments of, or low quality data assessments with information coming out of those high quality assessments. Is there a way to group the general knowledge coming out of all these assessments, even if the quality of data feeding into them is different?
Well, I mean, you're asking about combining, but I would say that one important point is, I think it's quite relevant, is to say that though we have some stocks for which data is limited, and then we would be currently applying the data limited method. And the question is, the point is that, well, we could be only provide partial advice, or but the issue is that we should think about improving or defining what would be the relevant data to be collected, and trying to put in place the data collector or sampling program that allows us to get more data and of say good quality. So it's a kind of tiering up and upgrading that stock, not from a data limited, say, to a data rich one. And of course, one can discuss and say that, well, maybe that's not possible to do for all the stocks that we would put or are currently in the category of data limited. But the first step would be to say that, okay, could be a criteria to categorize or prioritize those within the category of data limited and say, for these other stocks, either because they are important commercially, or because they are important in terms of ecosystem considerations. And in that case, that could be starting by having a prioritization and saying, for these stocks, we should aim to upgrade them to a data rich, in the sense that we would be collecting this type and this type of data, so we can upgrade the stock assessment. Because there, then, of course, that was the idea of the presentation, saying that with a data with a good or good quality or data-rich stock assessment, well, we have much more information, and our uncertainties in terms of the real state of nature and the stock performance and trends a long time is much better than when you have a data limited one, because a lot of uncertainties and gaps are there, and we have a poor knowledge or perception of what's going on. Okay. And I think that what you referred also raised me another point, which is important, is to say, yeah, so we are talking about methods. Maybe it's not only the stock assessment, but methods that allow us to extract biologic information from the data. So there is also a development in terms of methods, in particular those who try to investigate the spatial distribution of the species and fish stocks. And there are some methods showing that maybe you don't, not so demanding in terms of data, but if you have some of the data, there are ways of exploring it to extract information on the species distribution. And that is quite also important to feed in a stock assessment, either a data rich or for the data limited ones. Of course, sometimes it's say data demanding in the sense that one would need a spatial information, and that could be quite an issue. For instance, I could give you an example where just using information on the land composition, on the landings land composition, which is coupled with VMS data, so where we would have the tracking of the fishery and the fishing ground, and nowadays that is available through the AES or a VMS or AES, automatic identification system, that the vessels, research vessels have. And so coupling the two, we were able to extract information with a very high resolution, say daily resolution. So we were picking up information of the daily landings for a certain research vessel with the fishing ground of the vessel, and we were able to model that and extract a lot of biologic and information on the distribution of the stock. And then the ultimate goal will be to use that and to feed that information into the stock assessment. Well, these were 2 points.
And sorry, just one last thing. Like, so that type of data on the spatial distributions, for example, how is that ever released by countries or the people who do the management of the stocks onto something like OBPS, onto those centralized repositories for reporting on fish distributions?
Well, I would say that the VMS data, for the VMS data, there are confidentiality issues. Well, so in fact, it's not a kind of data that is broadly available to everyone. So yeah,
but maybe in a processed
it
format
might be available
for
scientific purposes. So the example I was talking about was data that we have dealt with, Portuguese data from the fishing vessels. Yeah. So, but we had to deal with it and just ensure the confidentiality issues that the data, to comply with those. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. That's a very interesting discussion on the technology and how that can provide new opportunities, and these issues with sharing or not sharing of data is also, I think, a sort of underlying theme here. I mean, we have players like Global Fishing Watch who are, providing information that allows us to detect the illegal fishing, for example, and becoming more and more advanced and detecting how, not only where the vessels are, but actually how they are operating, what kind of fisheries they're involved in, and so on. And some of this is, it's not actually run by governments. It's sort of a standalone thing, but it's interesting. It will be interesting to see how these players develops. And I mean, the Directorate of Fisheries in our country, and I'm sure elsewhere, is also using these techniques, of course, to oversee and see what's happening. But the flow of data into the stock assessment, I think, is as you allude to, Manuela, is a critical thing here.
Yeah,
I think it's a bit of a sort of geographically constrained example, but obviously ICES has been developing this transparent assessment framework that isn't yet implemented for all stocks, obviously, but the idea that you have a sort of standardized structure through which the process flows. So yeah, it doesn't address the data richness or the choice of assessment method, but it gives a common structure. So for example, if you are looking for advisory output from a range of different stock assessments, you'll have a increasingly common way of accessing it and seeing that information in a way where you might not be able to access all of the data, but the process is going to be as transparent as it can. So it can't always be open because there's commercial interests in it, but you will be able to see as much of the process as is basically possible, in terms of you can see which model was being run, where the data can be open. ICES at least is aiming to make it open. And the advisory output at the other end will also start being more sort of structured and flow in a similar way. So you'll have essentially, ICES already produces these advice sheets for all the stocks. Some of those are going to be increasingly automated to include summaries from this transparent assessment framework. They'll be able to say something about what were the data sources. And of course, for some of the data rate sources, there are a lot of material already available, either nationally or within ICES. And some of the spatial products we were talking about before, there are some spatial fisheries products also being worked up by some of the working groups in there. There's a spatial fisheries data products working group that are delivering some products. I think the challenge there is there's a lot of stocks and it's a relatively small group, so they can only cover some examples, and I think they're currently more focused on what they call the fisheries overviews to kind of create a kind of regional picture of where the main fishing pressures are, rather than explicitly so much for individuals. So obviously there's a lot of VMS data that goes into the stock assessments themselves, but the products, I think, tend to be a bit more generalized, simply because trying to reproduce them for every single stock is challenging.
Yes, Manuela.
Yeah. So I take the opportunity because Jan referred to the TAF, Transparent Assessment Framework, which is being implemented by ICES. Yeah, well, I think this is very good. And but I can add that the aim is more ambitious in the sense that while the transparent assessment framework, and so far we have ICES has already a lot of stocks for which the TAF is working. I mean, so everything is coded and available. So I mean, the data that feed the assessment, the stock assessment, and the stock assessment itself. So in the sense it is transparent and documented. But the aim, final aim, is more ambitious in the sense that the idea is to starting from the data collection. So to link from the data collection, so everything will be coded, again, transparent and documented in the sense that even the methods to compute the data that feed the assessments will be starting from the very beginning. So from the raw data collected, and then everything is processed, and discussions and experts working groups are working on that in the sense to develop a robust statistical sampling approach, so that the data that is going to feed the stock assessment is starting from the very beginning. So that's, I think that's very important, and I'm sure the model in the sense, the idea and the model will be adopted by other commissions. Yeah, so not only from the Northeast Atlantic, which is where ICES works mostly, the stocks from the Northeast Atlantic, but maybe by other commissions, could be the ICAT, International Commission for the Atlantic Tunas, or whatever. Yeah, so I think that's important. So thanks for referring to that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
and
just
also
in terms of best practice, I think it might be, you know, a step in the right direction, at least in terms of trying to create something where you can, you have an clear, totally open end product in mind, but you can actually also implement it sort of gradually insofar as you have a structure and a framework around it that allows you to work towards it without having to do it all at once. Because very often, if you want to try and introduce a best practice, it's almost like it's all or nothing. You know, you must do everything completely openly straight away immediately, or it won't work. I think that's one of the good things about the approach that ICES has developed, is that it does allow for that slightly more gradual development of that process.
Yeah.
So very good. So moving towards transparency, or maybe we could talk about data and information sharing in fisheries even more widely. Best practice for that is would be an interesting topic.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I think
if everybody has seen in the chat. Thanks to Nikos and Jens for a couple of links there, which are useful to everybody, I think. Yeah. Very good. Sorry, Manuela, I didn't want to cut you.
No, it's okay. So I think that the word documenting is also that, because, well, options or decisions that need to be taken in this whole process need to be documented, and that would be a way of documenting those. Yeah. So even when you start computing or dealing with the raw data from you collect, either from biological data or the fisheries data. I mean, and until you get the data that feeds the assessment model, you need to take some decisions, right? Say this, this sample will be not used. Why? So you reject one sample, there is a reason. So everything will be documented. And I think that's very important. So for instance, catch at age, you have age length keys. And for suppose a stock that is shared by several countries, they have their own sampling program, and then you have to merge that into one catch at age that is feeding the stock assessment model. So in between, there is a lot of process and decisions that need to be taken. So I think it's important that they are documented. So if not, it will be completely impossible in a year's time for someone to reproduce the stock assessment a time series, or reproduce the stock assessment. So that's the aim, to be reproducible.
Thank you, Manuela. Following on from that, maybe another but related question. You mentioned the large number of models which are out there, and of course they have different origins and used for different purposes and different complexity, of course, and maybe different architecture. I think if somebody not in the fisheries field coming from the outside and learning about this state of affair, they would maybe think of, you know, like ocean models, circulation models, or climate models, and there are intercomparison projects and stuff like that that maybe wouldn't be quite to be expected to do in the fisheries area. But kind of an overview of the typology or architecture of these models, or where they are coming from, and validation processes and stuff. Can you or anybody inform a little bit what is the status there? Do we have a good overview and documentation of how all these models are working, or what is empirical, what is documented, what is not documented, etc.?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there are there is one project with the drumfish, and there is even a available website where they try to do a kind of a compilation of the methods available, and categorize them depending on the data they use. But more also very important, I think the assumptions of, I think it's important never to forget what are the assumptions of behind the method that is being applied. And that is very important, that the assumptions are always clear. And 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 another important point is if the method has been tested or not. So because testing the models is also very important, right? So this is one way of could be used. I can then send you the link to that one. Drumfish is a website where they have, and there are also we had them in ICES. There is an expert group for data limited methods, and I take the opportunity to say that the expert group, we will be meeting in the first week of October, just in case some of you want to join us. Okay, so this is a good group of colleagues that have been working and developing the methods for 10 years. So the first group, expert group, it's WK Life. So we are now going for the 10th meeting of WK Life. And also, so we have also one of the reports, I think it's 2018. There is also a good compilation of methods for data limited methods or data limited stocks. So with kind of a summary for each of these, saying what's the basis of the method, what type of data that it uses, and also referring to the caveats of each of these methods. So this could be also a good reference. Okay, so it is the reports from the WK Life meetings, and these are the one.
Yeah, thank you. Please let's take that up in the follow up in the report. What the link and what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Any other? I don't know if is any other question or.
Yeah, that was what I was asking. If we have any other questions or comments.
Yeah, Christian speaking. Manuela, you identified before a couple of examples of the horse mackerel long-term management strategy and the US Atlantic herring control rule. Do you identified these as, let's say, the use case of success stories for this kind of um, management
Yeah.
strategy evaluations, or would you suggest those as possible, yeah, let's say case studies or success stories for providing example
Well, yeah.
or guidance on how to move on this?
Yeah, yes. Well, my opinion on that, from the cases I know, I can say it is a good outcome. I mean, having agreed and approved management strategy or management plans for a stock is a way to guarantee a sustainable exploitation, or in the case of a stock which is in a bad situation or bad shape, the recovery of the stock. Well, in my opinion, one of the reasons for that is that the development of a management strategy or a management plan, it is a process that should and must involve also the stakeholders. So when everyone is involved, it's easier when everyone is involved to guarantee a success of something. So, so there is a forum where everyone can discuss and relevant aspects like what are the objectives for this management plan, what kind of options do we want to explore. This is from the side of the stakeholders. So what are your objectives? What do you aim? What are options that you want to explore? What are the kind of constraints that you find, that you think that are relevant? What kind of metrics could be important for you? What would you like to evaluate, to measure as an outcome of this management plan? So with everybody involved, it is easier that you have a success for something. And this, from the scientist side, it is our task to do the to do the computations and to be clear and be able to present the outcomes, the results from the several options, the exploration, whatever we explore, which is also sometimes a difficult task because we need to make it simple, and using management strategy valuation, which is some complex way of doing it, sometimes is not that easy. But I think in response to your question, I would say yes. We see that the stocks that are being managed based on a management strategy or management plan are in a good say in a good shape, or getting to a good shape if it is the case of a recovering the stock to sustainable levels. Yeah. And for instance, I was involved in the development of the management strategy for this southern horse mackerel stock. And I must say that the process took more than 3 years. So it's not something, it's not a click. So the process started with meetings with the stakeholders for discussing the objectives, discussing the type of harvest control rule to be applied. So we had several meetings back and forth until we got to agree from their side on a set of options to explore. So then we did the computations using the management strategy evaluation and showing the results, until then in a final meeting they come on agreement on a final option, and this is the one that will be our proposal of a management strategy to present to the EU Commission. And well, so it was really very interesting and good. And so my experience, I would say, yes, good to have involved everyone in the process from the very beginning. This is not always the case. So people, where you come up with agreements, everybody kind of consensus, say, where in the end you have a consensus on a proposal. In other cases, there is still some debate, but I think it's a good point to have everyone involved from the very beginning.
Thank you, Christian and Manuela. I get a message. Is Nicole Kostner trying to take the floor? Would you have a question or comment, Nicole? I can't see you, but I see.
Hey, no,
yeah.
sorry, I'm not going to talk much. I'm just interested a little bit in the topic.
Okay.
So I'm listening more or less.
Okay.
Hang on, I will switch on my camera. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, no, that's fine. I just was curious if you were trying to get on or not.
No, I can hear you. I was unfortunately I was unable to listen to the first part because I was listening to another event in parallel. So I'm sorry for being late.
Okay. Well,
Personally, I'm not much involved in the fisheries side. I'm a project manager of EuroSea, which is a new EU-funded project, and one of our work packages also, working with stakeholders in fishery and aquaculture. And that's why I thought it would be good for me to get some background information and listen to you here.
very good. This is all about communicating across boundaries as well, not only within the different silos. So that's fine. And I just point again to Jens has put up the website for this WK Life ICES thing. I wonder if I could I challenge Nikos, if you have a comment here. We have a lot of talk about ICES because I think most of us are linked to ICES and this area, and Nikos, you know ICES as well, but you're also working a lot in around Africa and places also where the data access is different and where ICES is not operating. Would you have any comment or perspective? Sorry for putting you on the spot, Nikos.
In areas in developing countries in general, has to do with data availability. And at the end of the day, as Manuela has already mentioned,
we're getting some noise here. Maybe if everybody else can mute their microphone. Yeah.
Probably that's me. Just give me a second. Attending multiple workshops, that's what the problem is. So in areas like Africa, in developing countries in general, the problem is data limitation. And at the end of the day, data limitation is a problem because the lack of funds. If we want to get better data, we need to have more people involved, more things done, more resources available. And that's not easy in this area. So we have to find efficient ways of exploiting as much as possible the collected data, and as well as putting into place processes like machines to do the work for us where it's possible, automated procedures in order to lower the cost and increase the quality of the data. It's not it's not rocket science what I'm referring to, but we have to transfer this kind of work from developed countries to developing countries, and this is the experience we've been getting from these countries over there.
Yeah, thank you. So looking at what ICES is doing is not irrelevant. It's a question of having it.
Definitely not. ICES and other institutions around the world that have this role provide really good work at the end of the day, and really good directions in order for other countries that do not have the means to develop. So recently, for example, I came across a paper that was describing on how to analyze the otolith structure, the daily rings, from automated methods without having human observers. And if we're just talking about a machine that can do the work at a satisfactory level compared to the human reader, then getting that machine and starting putting it into work will immediately improve the collection of that output of the collected data, and will provide the opportunity to collect this data with a minimum extra cost for the collection, but a substantially reduced cost for the analysis of otoliths, which takes a lot of time and a lot of expertise, also for the people to be ready to be qualified otolith readers. So these kind of tools, at the end of the day, even if they have a relatively high cost buying the machine, for example, can improve substantially the situation and subsequently the management of valuable stocks that most of the times are now being managed on a very data limited stock assessment approach.
I'm a bit curious about whether, I mean, I totally understand why we want to bring automation in probably more expensive countries, basically, where having an otolith analyst costs a lot of money and are probably quite hard to attract and retain. And so in some ways, the case for automation is also a cost-saving thing there. I'm just wondering, because there's an element of best practice as well that's about inclusivity, making sure that in the areas where we do an assessment, the country or the population or the industry that's involved have an opportunity for insight and understanding of the process as well. So I mean, I'm generally a technology enthusiast. So I totally get what you're saying about, you know, if we could process 10,000 otoliths for the same cost as normally take a traditional analyst to do 500, then by all means we should do that. But there is an element also of if we just rock up somewhere and kind of go, and then you put it in the machine and then you wait, and then a number comes out the other end and you don't need to worry about understanding the process. I'm wondering whether there's a balance there that needs to be struck when you're working in a sort of more international collaborative thing. I know it's a really, really hard balance between resource and capacity, but I was wondering if anybody has any reflections on that.
If I may, yeah, I fully agree. Of course, there needs to be inclusivity. Of course, there need to be people that are trained on and can validate what the machine throws out. That's for sure. What we also need to think is that the developing countries or the underdeveloped countries cannot always be waiting for development to go over there after many years, and they need to catch up on the train of the revolution that is taking place with AI and machine learning. So, as you say, there needs to be a very good balance, and it's very hard to strike. But we need to find ways to improve on that. That's what I think, and I definitely agree that inclusivity is a major point that we need to take into account.
I think you struck a really important point there. It's about, yeah, jumping over the unnecessary and painful parts of the learning process. But you know, you still want people who are informed, but you don't necessarily have to go through the long and torturous process that's brought people to the point where they could develop the technology. But you do need somebody with the adequate knowledge to understand how that technology works.
Maybe I can chip in with the obvious, maybe a story that everybody knows, that, you know, the sub-Saharan Africa don't have a lot of telephone lines, but they have quite a good coverage of mobile phones. So they jumped that step. And I wonder if there could be other steps also in technology. We're talking about satellite technology and you know, other developments, eDNA perhaps, you know, if you have the possibility to collect samples without too much procedural training and so on, these could be collected maybe by canoes in the Pacific, for example, or whatever. I mean, there are ideas like this where if you're able to jump across one technology, you can maybe provide access for some of these things equally well across the globe, and not only for the high income areas. But this was a very broad statement, and we have to find the specifics to make this come true. Yeah. Okay, we can go on for more 15 minutes, but we don't need to go on for the 15 minutes. So I think I will ask, yeah, Manuela, of course.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, just to say that when well, I was working with Richard, and because you know that we have decided to prepare to have a common presentation, right? So we will be doing the session late today or very early tomorrow. I think it's about midnight in Europe, yeah. And then we were discussing, and we thought that there were three subjects linked with stock assessment that could be of interest to consider. So is likely to discuss some in the other session. But just let me tell you what were the subjects. So one is about model ensemble. Okay, model ensemble. The other one would be about stock assessment models for multi-fleet and multi-species and multi-fleet. And the other one could be the issue about incorporating environmental variability or regime shifts in the assessment in the assessment forecasts. This is also quite challenging. So maybe the one where we would talk about multi-fleet and multi-species. So we would say mixed fisheries issue. This is an important element of many of the fisheries in Europe. Mostly, say, when you say Southern Europe, so you also have the Mediterranean, but in Portugal, is mixed fisheries also important. In Portugal, Spain, France, maybe not so much in the northern countries, like Norway or Denmark, or whatever, but for the southern it is. So it puts challenges, right? So we are talking about a fishery. So a fishery with a certain gear catching several species at the same time, and one of the species caught in this one is also caught by other fishes with other gears. So we will have a kind of a we will have technical interactions, but also in case there are biological links between species, also multi-species considerations. So relations prey or predator. So what are the challenges when we do an assessment on a single species basis? And okay, we have a reference point for that species or that stock. So now suppose we translate that into a mixed fishery. So we don't have one species, but we have several species. And each of these species has its own FMSY. So the question is it possible to fish all fish at the same time at its own individual FMSY? We know it's not. So what's the challenge? Well, it puts a lot of challenge. So first, what could be the consequences of that? So let's imagine the situation where we have a choke species. So this species, in a certain year, it has been established total annual catch for that species, which is caught in a mixed fishery. And okay, so that's the TAC. Then the quote has been attributed to each of the countries. Now the fishery starts. The abundance in that particular year starts to be quite high, but the quota is small. So the quota is exhausted, and what happens? Well, if everything is working, the fishermen should stop fishing. But if they stop fishing, then they have other species they would be catching in the mixed fishery that have not yet exhausted their own quota. So they are losing the fish. So it's quite challenging, is right. So this is one example of an issue that mixed species can bring. But then in terms of stock assessment or assessment, what are the challenges? So one is about, okay, so it's about the reference points, and also to estimate the reference points that could take into account these aspects. And one attempt that has already been done is to consider not a point estimate, for instance, for FMSY, but an interval, a range of values for FMSY with a lower and upper range. And so trying to see if it is possible a trade-off between these ranges, the range of each of the reference points for each of these species. Okay, so to see if there is a way where, but also it requires that managers make choices. So the trade-off, it's more for managers than for scientists. We can come up with an estimate in computing and estimating these ranges and make them available. But then what is the option? So that's for management choices. So if manager's choice is that, okay, this is the main, this is our species of concern. So we want to exploit the species to the maximum possible. And then scientists can do the computations and see what are the consequences or likely effects on the other species in the mixed. So, well, this just want to come up with this one because it's challenging, and now I can say we can say that there has been in terms of the stock assessments for the multi-fleet and multi-species. Okay, so trying to incorporate our understanding of the spatio-temporal distribution and dynamics of the fish and of the fishery and the fish. There is already developed a toolbox which allow us to do simulations. So trying to simulate what would be the response, in the simulation world. Okay, so I think this is a first important step.
Yes, certainly complex, and also linked to, you know, the social and economic choices and management, as you say. And yeah, one thing is if the bycatch in some other fisheries is limited, but once it starts getting high, then we can have these issues coming up. Also, maybe you mentioned environmental variability and regime shifts, and certainly the training of our knowledge and understanding encapsulated in models is based on what we have experienced. And once you move into different whole settings, then it's a question how valid is everything that we are doing, and how do we deal with that? Can we have some good examples of how to deal with it? It's really difficult because we don't know. I mean, we can see trends, but we don't really know what will be the consequence of those environmental trends, and how to deal with the stocks in a situation where boundary conditions are in a different parameter space. Okay, if there are no further comments from anybody else, maybe I will go back to you one final time, Manuela, and ask you if there is any sort of wrap-up comment you'd like to give at the end. I know I've put you on the spot for many things, but is there any message you'd like to close before we close this meeting to based on what we've discussed and for the follow-up?
Okay, well, I think somehow I have already said it, in the sense that what I think would be the final comment is about the challenges for the future related to stock assessment. So I think the three topics that I've referred, say, model ensembling, so which is quite relevant in the sense that They can support stock assessments by addressing structural uncertainty, but it's also relevant and important for management strategy evaluation in the sense of for building the operating model. And the other one, so we would say the multi-fleet, multi-species stock assessment models. So we see already some development, but there are still a lot of challenges for the future in terms of modeling. So we can start by having ways, by having the chance to do simulations, but we still need to develop the modeling part. And the other one is, okay, so we can, for the future, make predictions or forecasts, even considering either environmental changes or regime shift or climate changes. But of course, our predictive power is quite low. So this will need to be mostly based on scenarios. So it will be based on scenarios, and it will require a constant update, because as more information we have, and more knowledge we should have about what's happening or what's changing. And also it relates also to the reference points. So in a situation where we see a regime shift, for instance, for a particular stock, because then regime shift, it means it's a strong, rapid, abrupt change that lasts for some time, right? It's not 1 year or two. They will last for some time. How long? It depends on the species, of course. But I think that also puts the challenge in relation to our ability for these other forecasts to adapt in terms of the reference points, which are then will be the guidance in terms of deciding if the stock has recovered or not. So and the challenge is mostly because each stock resilience, the stock resilience depends on a lot of factors. And how is the stock the stock resilience depends on the species ability to adapt to the changes. So that puts also quite remarkable challenges, our knowledge on that.
It's not only the known unknowns, it's also the unknown unknowns, and we move into new text. Yeah, exactly. Yes. All right, I think I will point again, Jens has provided another link in the chat, and we will capture everything from the chat when we report. So, and also try to make a best possible summary. It's actually Christian who is taking the heavy load here on that part. But I think we are, unless you want a small comment on that, Jens, the final link that you put up, I think we're ready to close.
Yeah, it is a bit old, to be honest, now. 2013, 14, kind of centered around that World Conference of Stock Assessment. So, but there were some examples of good practice about selectivity and data weighting and stuff like that. So I think it aligns with what Manuela has been saying, but, you know, I think we have progressed, and hopefully I think that's been demonstrated, but I think there's still relevance in them as well in that point, but probably expressed in a more generic way. And I think we refined it more over the last 6 or 7 years.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for contributing to this. We had a limited group, but a high quality discussion, I would like to say, and many we were able to allow everybody to take the floor and have questions and comments. And but I'd like to thank most of all Manuela for preparing the talk and doing it and being involved so much in the discussion. We will, as I said, try to take this forward, and you're all of course able and invited to take part in further sessions and in looking at the documents and the various things available for the fisheries, but also, of course, for the other parts of this ocean best practices. We continue tomorrow on the next topic, following tonight's sort of parallel to this one, and on to Thursday. And I don't want to keep you anymore for repeating those administrative things. I think there is a lot of things available on the Kiko chat and various emails that you had to access this. If you have any problem, contact the staff on that. So a great word of thanks from me to Manuela and to all of you. Thank you for taking part in this, and we will try to bring it forward with the rest of the process. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you all. So thank you,
everyone.
thank you, Peter, and all of you. So bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers. Thanks.